live. I'd like to introduce Benjamin Corll here from Zscaler. We are now on, I believe it's episode 20 of Around the Ben podcast. Thank you so much for being here, Ben.
Absolutely. It's a pleasure.
It's always nice to have different security folks here on the podcast. We had chatted before about maybe whether it's cybersecurity or not, how the difference of your perceived objectivity when you're working in a field and then transitioning into, let's say, like a vendor in that field, and where your experience has been not only in the industry, but that kind of transitionary period and how your kind of interesting thoughts on it.
No, I love it. Absolutely. And yes, I was at Enterprise CISO for quite a few years. And then I got an opportunity to move to vendor land, if you will. And I took a role as a CISO in residence, as you said, with Zscaler. And when I started notifying people that I had moved jobs, I started getting, ooh, you've joined the dark side. And I'm like, the dark side? We're still on the same side here. And yeah, a lot of times the fellow CISOs were my friends yesterday. And now, as you said a moment ago, it's, have you lost objectivity? And it's like, we've been friends or at least colleagues for the last 10 years. And do you really think because I now work for a vendor, which should be a partner, not just, it should be both of us helping each other. Why do you think I can no longer be objective? Did my opinions, did my value, and did we have so little trust built between us that you think I can no longer be of value to you any longer? That was a rude awakening for far too many conversations.
One thing I would say, or maybe because I do more like the technology IT recruiting in general, is that especially among, let's say, like software engineers, cybersecurity, analytics, data folks, like there's almost like this, if we're paying money, then somehow it's not good or it might be like bad for us. And when people kind of take that transition of, like, especially in software development, oh, I'm a dev, or they go to make their own company, or then they move into, like, let's say, what do you call it? Like the, solutions delivery. All of a sudden people are like, oh, you're just here to upsell me. And it's like,
Uh,
that's just, to me, it's bizarre. And maybe some similarity in recruiting is like, somehow if you work in a giant enterprise, you're totally great at your job. But as soon as you go to work for like one of these boutique firms or one of these larger recruiting firms, you have to be bad because there's more money involved or something. Like, just doesn't really, like, in my mind, doesn't add up, at least on the
yeah.
ground floor.
And I'll build one more, one rabbit hole off of what you just said as well. Is okay, you're a CISO because you have a team of 100, and you've got a huge budget, all of that. Now you work for this boutique firm, or you move to a company and start a brand new security team. So you start with as a team of one, or an army of one, or two or three. Are you still considered a CISO or not? All your past experiences, everything that you've done to that point, but because maybe your hands are on the keyboard for the first time in years, you're no longer seen as a real CISO anymore. You're tactical, you're not as strategic, but you went there because now you get to build your program based on your experiences, not taking over somebody else's program. Maybe that's why you went there and you have the title CISO, but I've seen where others are like, yeah, you're not a real CISO because you don't have a team. You can't delegate. It's
Mm.
amazing.
It's also, I think, unfair because I see on the IT side of things, there's many organizations that force an IT manager in title to basically be like 7 different roles in one. And I've met CISOs that are basically hands-on doing work while directing IT, while they're trying to like coordinate vendors for like pen testing, while
Yep.
doing all these other responsibilities that they really shouldn't be doing. And that's actually a hard, I mean, maybe I'm talking outside of my lane, but it's harder, in my opinion, when you're actually doing seven people's jobs than to be sitting in a big org and saying, I would like it that we do this now. Show me your KPIs. You have done bad on your KPIs. Like, you're more just like relaying information, which of course is important when you're in a really large org, but it's just not
Yep.
the same real level of stress, I don't think, when you have like seven jobs. Or I've seen
Yep.
people like legitimately have five jobs to do that they should have a team of four other people and it's just them doing everything.
Oh, absolutely. Wearing multiple hats, yes. And but what I'll say is, it's just a different type of stress because you're going to have different dynamics. In the larger organization, your stakeholder management may be more important. And yes, I'm using that term instead of saying politics.
Yeah.
So, uh, but you will have to deal with that as well. With some of the smaller organizations, you can sit there and say for at least a period of time, you might be able to get through a little bit of security through obscurity. Yeah, we're still a target. You're still connected to the internet. You can still be found. So you can't sit there and say, well, that's my plan. But maybe you get a little bit of time there as well, even though you're wearing multiple hats. Perhaps you are the IT manager. Perhaps you also own privacy, especially if you're a company that needs to transfer data between the EU and the US, and they're going to say, "Ooh, this guy or this gal, that's the one we're going to do."
Mm-hmm.
So many different nuances that are out there too.
And it's just it's kind of crazy how much people are kind of, or I should say organizations are putting on people, and especially watching like the project load is not increasing as much as it was, like, let's say a year ago or maybe a year and a half ago. So a lot of people are being expected to do like 30% more, 50% more, no new budgets. And it's just kind of like putting a lot of extra pressure, um, just in the industry as a whole. One other
Uh,
thing I would kind of wanted to kind of tackle or maybe jump into is I feel like multiple field CTOs or field CISOs, like you're almost like a filter though to your organization, because there's probably times, and I've heard many people in the security industry talk about this, where it's like you don't want to mess with your own reputation and just selling something is not important. And I've heard people actually close deals or say, no, we don't do that. And no, that's this solution isn't good for what you're trying to get done as well.
Now, one of the things that you said a moment ago, do more with less. I've been in this industry. This is my 29th year in this industry. And every single year, that's what I hear: do more with less. So it's just common. So yeah, absolutely, yeah. But nothing happens. The saying, and I heard this from Tom Mendoza back in my NetApp days, long time ago. Says everyone's in sales, and nothing happens until the sale is made. Now back to another thing that you rightly said is not every solution will solve every problem. And it's okay to say our solution does not solve that problem. This is why you map out what the problems are, different use cases. This is where we can help you. That's a use case perhaps I've never heard of, but let me think about it. But no, don't oversell. And yes, we can sit here and say they're bad individuals in no matter what role, and you will have a bad salesperson who will mislead. And we can solve that problem. Absolutely. And then the SE later, or someone who's trying to implement, it's like, I have no idea why you were told this. We've never done this before. Yeah. I think every organization's run into it.
I think the funniest phrase I've heard is, "Oh, it's on the roadmap."
and, and roadmap to me, if it's on the roadmap, then it's got whether it's an enhancement request, it has a date put for implementation. Is it at least in beta at this point? If it's roadmap, there's there's allocated resources or dates. It's not a dream or a wish. If it's just written down somewhere on a piece of paper because it's on a roadmap, then that's not really on the roadmap.
No, it's very true, and it's funny because I used to sell used cars, so that's like in people's mind the ultimate, I don't know, sneaky kind of sales environment. And I got here into the tech industry and I was like, people are like kind of wild out here. They're like doing some of these things I've saw back when I sold used cars, but they have really
Yeah,
fancy titles and organizations they're attached to. And I guess it's still not okay just because you work at a really popular C round tech company, but it's still happening.
yeah. No, again, people, they're bad apples in every bunch. And, it's how do you get beyond that? But when it comes to sales, doesn't matter what you're selling. The principles of selling is going to go from industry to industry, which is why you were able to go from used car sales to now to tech as well. So love it.
I think it comes down to like one thing you talked about in our previous conversations, like you're there to fix things. And if you're not fixing things, then it doesn't really matter, like just getting that solution out there. I think you were talking about like an old manager just a minute ago who's like nothing happens till the sale starts. But
Yep.
then to keep things going, you need to I don't really think of like sales as really selling. It's sales is about solving. So
Yep.
if you're constantly solving, things will keep moving along and people will look at you and say, "Oh, why do you keep getting all these deals and things keep moving and this keeps happening?" It's
Yep.
like, I'm not really selling though. Like that's the
Yep.
thing that a lot of people don't get.
Yeah. So I have a colleague that I work with, and he believes that our title really should be the chief trust officer, because
Mm,
that's what we're trading in is trust. And if we're selling anything, we're selling trust. And people, people buy from other people. And our industry is way too small. And you're going to move from company to company. If I bought from you the last company, now when you land at your new company, you're going to call me. And I remember the relationship. And you sold me a bill of goods and it solved the problems. If it didn't, I'm never buying from you again. So yes, you're building again on trust. So people buy from people, not company to company. It's person to person. And can I trust you?
hmm I guess, yeah, especially in cybersecurity, especially in the US among like the CISO community is pretty small. So it's really easy to burn a bridge, and once that bridge is burned, it's you're not going to rebuild it.
Oh, it'll take a lot,
How big do you think, like, I don't know off the top of my head, like all these different cybersecurity solutions that are out there that are growing compared to like let's say a lot of the other SaaS services out there, like what percentage of the market is it? Like 3%, 5%? I don't feel like it's a lot, but they get a lot of like recognition and sort of like funding and they get really like top of mind, kind of like Zscaler.
I used to have a saying of, no one ever got fired for buying whoever was in the top right of the Gartner Magic Quadrants. And if you're not going to do a POV or POC, you're just going to go and say, oh, I'm buying this industry best tool. And bam. And then, well, it didn't get implemented well. Well, was it the tool? Was it your implementation? But you can sit there and say, I went with best of breed. And, well, obviously that's going to be the top 5% is going to be, the top right of those quadrants.
No, absolutely. Eh, I guess, I'll let you kind of shamelessly delve into Zscaler for a minute. Where do you guys fall in that quadrant?
A shameless plug. Listen to you. No, we were, the origin of that SASE, that security, that service edge that was out there. The largest security cloud that is out there, and the amount of data that we have, absolutely, which is why we're a leader in the market. We were by far the leader for years, and now our competitors are starting to catch up. They're duplicating a lot of what we're doing. Hey, that was a great idea. So you know, you know, I guess as they start copying us, that should be flattering as well. But absolutely, Zscaler has been a leader in the market for 6, 7 years at this point.
Because I have seen you guys around for quite for a minute. It's not something recent, but it takes time too to build up those solutions and build up that book of business and kind of that trust component. Is like once you have a solution that's getting what you need done, just because there's something with a nice UI that's coming out doesn't always mean it's a good idea to make that transition at times.
Well, so there's two things. Is the cycle when you buy this type of solution, you're going to buy it and implement it over a period of time, and whether that's a 3 year, whether that's a 5 year, but you also need to take into account those who have been in the industry as long as I have tend to go back to what they've always had as well. I
Mm-hmm.
was successful when I bought X brand of on-prem firewalls,
Mm-hmm.
and I built my career off of this. I was successful based on this. And if I'm still building security programs the way I built security programs 15 years ago, I'm unlikely to be successful. The threats have evolved, technology has evolved. Our data no longer sits in one location. I
Mm-hmm.
can't build big enough, thick enough, in anything, enough walls in order to protect it. My users aren't sitting in my corporate locations any longer. My data's not sitting there. I can't protect it the way I used to as well. So it's like, how do we make sure that we, as the protectors, the defenders, are evolving as well and have to challenge ourselves? I can't do what I always did and expect to be successful going ahead into the future.
No, absolutely. Because I mean, cybersecurity, it's like changing so rapidly. I mean, I think people say like every week, every month, there's like some new, what is it, new curveball that's going to get thrown at you. I mean, you just listen to like, was it that those different security podcasts? I listen to like the Black Hill Security podcast, and all they're doing is talking every week about like, hey, what's the newest hack? What's the newest thing? What's the newest vulnerability? I mean, not being in engineering or a security seat myself, like I can see people getting really used to tools and building their career off it. Because even in sales, people say, "Hey, 20 years ago when I started my career, we all, made the best deals by just calling everybody and cold calling everybody." And
Yep.
there's the technology's changed and the culture's changed, and some of my best sales and some of my best connections have come via LinkedIn or like these fun little marketing um, just things I've crafted on my own. But I still get told, "Hey, that doesn't work," and I'm like, "Well, the funny part is that it actually did," but I just
Yes.
kind of keep that to myself.
No, no. So I worked for a startup, probably 10ish years ago, and the lady who sat across from me was dialing for dollars every single day. She had her script, and nobody ever answered the phone, so she would leave a voicemail. And I had her script memorized because I heard it again 10, 15 calls a day. So she was dialing for dollars. It wasn't the way she wanted to do it, but the head of sales built his career doing it that way. And it wasn't until we got a new director under, in between them, that was like, you need to hit up through LinkedIn. You need to do this. You need to do that. He's like, this isn't 40 years ago. Times have changed. And when she started implementing some of the newer ways, we started seeing a much higher percentage of engagement. So again, you do have to change with the times as well, and don't be afraid if something's not effective. Change, get out of your own comfort zone. Things that worked for you in the past, if they stop working now, okay, let's adapt.
Mm-hmm. So actually, I'm curious about this because I've seen a couple articles. So you guys, of course, securing people in the cloud, securing the data in the cloud. What do you think of this there sort of seems to be like almost a step back from the cloud in general, like people pushing more into like hybrid cloud or multi-cloud. How is that changing the threat landscape? And I apologize if I'm throwing a curveball in here.
Well, I hope I can handle a curveball or three. Maybe I'll hit pause and but no. Uh, well, that's the thing is, as I said, our users aren't going to be sitting in one corporate location anymore, especially when companies are getting larger and going to be international, going to be working different places around the world. But with this multi-cloud, especially, where's your data and how do I grant access to the data? And this is one of the things that I've been talking about for a long time. Stop extending your network. Stop connecting your network. I don't need a point-to-point VPN tunnel. I don't need an always connected VPN tunnel. Connect that user or that identity to the resource. The principle of least privilege. Just connect to the one application. Don't connect my machine to your network. There's no reason for that because now I can start snooping around. Hey, I'm a curious person. You put me on a network. I want to know who else is here. What else is here? What else can I get to? And I'm not doing it maliciously, but there are going to be those that are going to do that maliciously. What else can I find? And this is how attackers, an attacker will get on your machine and that lateral movement. They're looking for higher value targets. They're looking for higher value data that they can take. There's a database, there's a file share. They steal all of your data, and then ransomware comes along. That's because we're connecting to networks. Why? And I know the reason. I said why because it's easy, and I don't have to figure out how to give Blake access to one particular application. And then if he needs access to a second application, I got to go and do work. And a third, I got to go again, grant access. Or I could just grant you access to my entire network and you can connect to all three. I did one change and you have access to everything. But again, you have access to everything.
Yeah, that can be a massive problem. But I mean, on the cloud, like arguably, wouldn't you have the same level of work managing permissions, or is it much easier just to box people in and say, okay, you're stuck in this, you can only upload things, and that's kind of it?
Absolutely, you can get granular, and again, it comes down to your implementation. How did you implement it? Did you put everything on one flat network? And there are ways of doing this. And I used to hear we're moving to the cloud because the cloud's more secure. Well, is it? Maybe the capabilities are there, but you still got to implement it properly, and you still have to configure it properly. It's still incumbent upon you. Just because you're putting your data in somebody else's environment, and that's what the cloud is, doesn't mean you're no longer responsible or certainly accountable still.
No, absolutely. This may be a weird one. Is multi-cloud, kind of runs the same risk, is that just the configuration goes up? And that's kind of where the danger comes in.
Oh, I mean, absolutely. So say you have your dev and QA that is going to be running in AWS, but you want your production to be in a separate cloud. So you move that to Azure or GCP. And then it's like, how do I give the right access to my developers so they can get access to all three environments? And again, principle least privilege. Who's going to be allowed to take data from your QA after it's been tested and promoted up to production? Do I allow the same developers that maybe they skip tests because they're got to push, and they're just going to take that? Do they have the rights to copy that from one cloud to the other, one environment to the other? Who has that capability, and what type of data is allowed? Maybe I have a multi-cloud. Maybe I'm running AWS in the US, and I only want the US data. I only want my user data from the US over here, but then I'm going to be running Azure in the EU, and I only want EU data. It comes down to, if that's what you're doing, and maybe you're doing that for a reason, then are you configuring that properly? I'm not saying that that's a good reason. That's probably a bad reason, but it's one that came to mind.
Well, I'm just also thinking too, like, The initial implementation versus the possible impact of not doing it, it's like so worth it to get
Well,
it configured and constantly configured,
uh,
adding and removing that access.
and I think that constantly or that continuously, and if you implemented your cloud environment 3 years ago, there's going to be new functionality today, new capabilities that have been released. And because it's a cloud environment, they're going to be there automatically. But you still have to enable them, you still have to configure them.
Hmm.
And hopefully you have somebody at that provider that reaches out to you every now and then, hey, these are the new features. But then your architects or your engineers will have to go and continuously evaluate, test it, and enable the new functionalities as well.
Hmm. Well, I mean, that's the biggest problem of what is it of just whatever your threat environment is like. It's constantly adapting, so you have to constantly adapt. And I think that's why a lot of the security people I talk to seem kind of stressed out.
Well, and you talked earlier. Does it are we less secure because we're in a multi-cloud, or however you phrased it? But it really comes down to every time you're moving your data somewhere, and if that system is accessible to the internet, even if it's RDP from the internet, which I hope not, a VDI that's accessible, even just a DNS call, that's where that the term of attack surface. You have more attack surface, and you can go to websites like Shodan, and I can sit there and say acme.com, and I can find everything that's associated with acme.com from that one site. And now I can sit there and start putting together reconnaissance of, if I were to attack this organization, how what's associated with it and how would I do that? Or I could sit there and say, Telnet, is Telnet still alive and well? And show me all systems that are still running Telnet that are internet accessible. So
Hmm.
that's the type of their website that help you and show you this type of information. And hopefully you're running it for your organization, so you find it before a would-be attacker finds it, and
Hmm.
therefore you can close those things, you can secure them.
Okay. Hmm. Yeah, that definitely seems like a kind of going back to my first point, why people are so stressed out is it's just constantly expanding, and then even once you fix it, you need to go back and retool it again, and then all the people that were in charge of it that it should have all been done, you find out like a month later it's not been automatically adding and taking away those permissions as it was supposed to, whichever system you're using or automation you'd built in place.
Oh,
So it's
absolutely. And you just take into account identity and accounts. And if you haven't federated, if you're not using single sign on, and all these accounts for these new systems that you rolled out, they're local.
Mhm.
When a person leaves, did you rotate, system passwords? Did you disable their password? You walk someone out on a Friday, and all of a sudden you come in on Monday to find out that all your data is gone because you forgot to lock out that admin's account. And well, it's in the cloud. It's available. So even though you may have disabled their Active Directory account, you didn't disable that local account. There's still maintenance things for you to do.
there is definitely some horrific stories I've seen for that. I mean, I can't name names, but there was one government entity I worked with where there had been somebody sitting in the IT/security seat for decades, was very upset for some reason when they left their job, and then decided, you know what, I'm just going to delete everything that's in here, all the passwords, all the, what do you call it, like connectors between things,
Yep.
and
Remove
just
certificates.
bingo, and just trashed it and left. And they were kind of like just stuck, for months and months, because then they brought in a new team to try and figure out, so what was going on here, and they're like, why can't we find anything? Why is nothing working? Why are there no passwords? Why is there no data on any of this? Like, kind of a scary thing to be in. Or this one is a lot smaller example, but I knew a guy who had a startup, and the CTO was working on other things besides the company, but had left like him as an active user on this software that was supposed to take screenshots of the work. So ironically, when he went to go check the work and he was like, I don't think we can work together anymore, he went back in because the guy had never deleted the permissions and was like, oh, wait a minute. What's all this work that has nothing to do with our company? And he had been paying him all this money and all this stuff. And it worked in his favor, but it was one of those crazy situations where you just are like, kind of exactly what you're saying. Like, look what happens when you don't pay attention to those user permissions.
Well, and that's sort of the problem with the security professionals is we are a cynical bunch, and but we see the worst part of people, and yet whether it be external threats, cyber criminals, whether it be insider threats, people trying to steal data, trying to copy to USB devices and walk out with it, or even unintentional data leakage events or data spillage as well. And well, I didn't think it was bad for me to forward that to my personal email so I can continue working over the weekend. Uh, all of that, those types of examples have made us extremely cynical because we're like, it's happened in the past, it can happen again. So when we are going and we're talking to people, it's like, yeah, we just want to get our job done. And I'm like, I want to get my job done too. And I want to enable you so you can get your job done without overly exposing the organization or exposing us to undue risk. And it's that fine line of we're here to support and enable the business. And we put
Mm.
these guardrails there, and as long as you stay between the guardrails that I've outlined, I really don't care what you do or how you do the things that you do. But it's when you're trying to go through, over, under my guardrails, now I'm interested. Now we need to have a conversation.
I may be guilty of doing such things from time to time. Just out of curiosity, this may be a dumb one. Why is sending things to the personal email a bad one? For my own
Oh,
knowledge.
yeah, well, it depends on what it is. But you get you work in HR, and you're got
Oh,
medical people's information because they're signing up for benefits, and all of a sudden you forward that out. You work in finance, and you got to work, and you're forwarding W-2s or your company information, financial information. You're a publicly traded company, and these numbers aren't public yet. You forward that out to to your Hotmail. I'm old school Hotmail or Gmail addresses and stuff, and that now that information, who owns it, who maintains it, is that whose data is that now, or you forgot that on the third tab in that Excel file, were debit card information or purchasing card. So now you've got, is that PCI? Okay, well that's certainly not good. You had no intention of forwarding that outside, and now your DLP or your data loss protection tool alarm bells are going off.
mm-hmm. No, that actually makes a lot of sense. So just making sure that I wasn't doing something that could get me in hot water. But that those
Uh,
are all, yeah, those all make sense.
and it really comes down to like your acceptable use policy, and what does it say? And a lot of organizations will have a person who's working at contracted, a project manager. You sell services, they're working at another company, and they'll do an auto forward for their corporate to their client as well. So everything that is sent to them will now be forwarded to the client's domain. Now they have that, all that data that's going out there. And it could, again, for publicly traded companies, that could be a big deal.
Mm-hmm. No, that could be a Big no no. No, definitely. Well, dang, I'm just trying to think. Like, I feel like we covered a lot of good juicy stuff. I do always like to throw this curveball to security folks. Like, what's something you'd like to share out there, not just with the CISO community, whether that's like IT or software dev folks, or maybe like a something in your career that really taught you like a valuable lesson that you think a lot of people could take something from.
Oh, wow. Yeah. You could have given me a heads up on that one.
I
It
should
would
have,
have been.
yeah. I really just thought of it right now, and I was like, you know what? I asked this to a couple people, and I thought, this. If there's nothing, we could always come back to it, and I could slap it in at the end because I know it was a little bit profound and off the
No,
cuff.
but that's the thing is I've been doing this role for a long time, and now I get the benefit of being engaged with a lot of different companies, more in an advisory type role as well. So I do get to talk to a lot of different people, a lot of different organizations, and I will say that you start talking to different roles, and they still, for a lot of organizations, see the security department as where ideas go to die, or this is a the office of no. Because we're not going to be able to do anything. This is why shadow IT, work around, and all of those things came about too. But I will say that you know over the last 5 or so years, I have seen our industry and the professionals grow, start understanding the business and understanding how to really work with the business as well. Not just focus on technology, but realize how to relate to people and build those relationships. I'm seeing a lot more of that. And perhaps it's because, I'm in a different type of role that I'm seeing it more. But I will say that that is a lesson that I had to learn of, you know, I started with Unix admin, and there used to be a joke of the Unix admin is the dude with the long beard that's in the back room that we never let talk to anybody. Well, the security people need to be approachable.
Hmm. No, not just a bunch of Mr. Robots. That's not going to work. No, I think that's actually a really good observation, and I think there's a parallel in a lot of different really kind of like hands-on fields where people have just gotten so fixated in their skill set where to wrap it all back together, like you said, everything, nothing starts until the sale starts, and even that can be internally. If you can't relay why what you're doing is valuable, then you might just be pushed into the back corner with your big long beard, not talking to anyone. You know what I mean?
And that's not necessarily a bad thing either.
Yeah, that's true. Everybody has their own things they want to be working on.
Absolutely.
Well, Ben, I feel like we covered a lot of good stuff, and I'd like to thank you for taking the time out on on this nice, at least for me, nice sunny afternoon.
Absolutely. I've enjoyed it.
Thank you, Ben.